بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to this youth halaqah. Inshallah, hopefully we'll be physically meeting back in the masjid with our youth once again and with our brothers and sisters once again in the masjid. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with health and to bless us with steadfastness in our deen and to keep us upon Sirat al-Mustaqim. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Today, inshallah, in our youth lecture, I want to talk about dealing with racism. And in regards to this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in Surah Al-Hujurat, يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. In Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He orders us as believers. And as you know, wherever in the Quran the verses start with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, this is where we should pay extra attention, utmost attention to practicing these commandments and fulfilling their requirements from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says here, O people, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, and this is not just talking to the believers, but also all of mankind. It's reminding them that there's a very great issue that you should be paying attention to. O people, we have created you. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, from a male and a female, from Adam and Hawa. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that we have made you tribes and nations, communities, people, that you will know one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best among you are those, and this is in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who have piety, righteousness, and they have taqwa. They are the muttaqi, they have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their hearts. And they are aware of Him and conscientious of their duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which in lieu will make them more mindful of how they deal with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since Allah is the creator of all of them, we have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created them. And inshallah, we'll be quoting some verses, some hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regards to this as well, about these things that we are seeing nowadays, especially about how people are treating one another. And some feel that they are superior over others, and others feel themselves inferior. Well, we'll talk about that and how we should deal with it in our societies, and how we can also teach our children at home, which is very relevant to us today, because we may not be able to voice ourselves in certain aspects, in certain places, like other people are doing. But the greatest impact that you can have is upon your own family, first beginning with yourself. And inshallah, we'll talk a little bit about how we can make that happen. So, in regards to this verse, Allah, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said in a hadith, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, inna rabbakum wahid, your Lord is one. So, first keep in mind that the creator of all human beings is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who created all people, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of where they come from, regardless if they were in the beginning of time. For example, after Adam alayhi salatu wasalam came to the earth and they came from their progeny or close to that time in that era, or afterwards in the time of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, Noah, or the other prophets that came to this world, or in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, until the day of judgment. Whether you're born, in this time and era. So all of these things, remember, inna rabbakum wahid. Your Lord is one Lord. And so what is being told to us here, and we're being reminded of, is our Creator is one. And all of you should be dutiful to that one Creator and that one Sustainer, because it's through Him that you are in existence. You were not existent at a time. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِّنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. This arrogance that we have inside of us, this feeling of superiority that I am better than that person or that race of people. Well, Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, your Lord is one Lord, reminding us that you were nothing and then you were. How can you, so what are you basing your pride upon? And so we should always remember that our reality. Then the hadith also says, وَإِنَّ أَبَاكُمْ wahid. Your father was one, Adam alayhi salam. All people, regardless of their race and ethnicity, they all come from Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in his final khutbah, and these were those very words, he said, ألا لا فضل لعربي على عجمي ولا لأعجمي على عربي ولا لأحمر على أسود ولا لأسود على أحمر إلا بالتقوى. And so he said that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab to an Arab, nor a red to a black, nor a black to a red person, or white to a black person, or a black to a white person. They are not superior above each other, except through taqwa, except through piety. Meaning that whoever among these people are more pious, and that's what the verse is referring to, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that verily the best of you, the most noble of you, are those who are more duty bound to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more conscientious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and righteous and pious. And they are those people who have taqwa. And so we should be among those people. And that's the first message that we should be giving to our own families, first of all, beginning with ourselves. And I want you to ask yourself this question. This question you should ask is, when you hear this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that I just stated, that there's no Arab that has superiority over a non-Arab, nor a black over a white or a white over a black. When you hear this, then Assess your own self. Are you one who really believes that? What the Prophet ﷺ said. I'm not talking about the brutal murder of the police officers to George Floyd, because that was something obviously of racism. That is something that was very, very sad, very horrific, very brutal. It's something hard for us to even digest. To see someone being executed in front of the screen where millions of people are watching this, your children may be watching this. What's going through their minds? First of all, how brutal was that murder? It's very hard to watch. And we as a people have come to this state. And we must assess ourselves that how can we let these things be happening around us? And yes, I'm pointing fingers to our own selves, because the solution to the problem is beginning with our own selves. And we have to, first of all, make sure we are ridded of each and every iota of pride and arrogance and racism. I say pride and arrogance because that's actually how a person feels that they are superior to another fellow human being. That just because of their language or just because of their skin tone, they feel that they are superior to other people. And we'll talk a little bit about pride. I have a video on that that was done during the month of Ramadan. I ask you to go back to that and watch that video and please implement that into your character. And it was a character correction course, and the topic's name was Pride and Its Cure. And so that video is essential for anyone who wants to at least start on the track of reformation and islahul fard. That is rectifying your own self first. Begin with your own self, because that's the solution to this problem. And that's where it's going to be, that's where it's going to start. And inshallah, through that, to our family, to those immediately who are impacted by our decisions and our actions and our sayings, and hopefully the community around us. Because we tend to sometimes do, certain activities, and I hope you won't take this in the wrong way, but nowadays we see that the activist ethos is one that is misleading, and that can be very dangerous because it can be based on superficial things, and sometimes they're just trendy aspects that we are following, and so they can also externalize the blame. Sometimes the evil is somewhere else, and we're looking at the wrong thing, and we're protesting on the wrong things. So, a lot of times when people protest, and most of the protests that are going on right now are correct and they should be done. And especially in aspects of this brutal murder that took place in front of our eyes, there's no justification to that. That person should be brought, or those people and those officers. Unfortunately, they're called officers. They really did not conduct themselves, even according to the Minneapolis police. They were not following the right conduct. And so they were fired. And they will be brought to justice. They have been blamed for murder. all four of them, and hopefully things will they will be brought to justice as soon as possible. But on the other hand, that does not give us justification to blame all police officers or to blame all white people for being racist. That doesn't give us justification to do that. And we should be careful to make sure that those people who should be brought to justice are brought to justice, but we don't transgress past those limits. Justice must be served, but it should be curtailed only to those who are transgressors. Now, so this is the question about the hadith. When we talk about the Prophet ﷺ's last khutbah and him saying that there's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, of a black over a white over a black, what are you practicing in your life? So we have to assess our own selves first and ask yourself, do you really believe that teaching of the Prophet ﷺ? Because we are seeing in our masajid, unfortunately, and I'm talking about more of our, and these are complaints from that I've been hearing, and most likely you have been also hearing, I'm sure, from our communities, from our own masjid, that the Afro-American brothers and sisters who come to the masjid, they are not feeling welcomed to the masjid. And they have a feeling of being ostracized. And that's not good. You know, especially when we have brothers and sisters, and a lot of them mean well, but some of them just don't understand that they need to be changing their protocols. And in front of them, if they're discussing something, for example, in Arabic language, that perhaps those brothers and sisters may not be understanding, but they should talk in English language so that they can understand. And I also went over some of these etiquettes as well, of how to avoid backbiting, how to avoid suspicion as well, and likewise how to avoid slandering. All of these were talked about in our character correction course. I hope you'll also watch that video, inshallah. Allah give us tawfiq. So our brothers and sisters, our black African American brothers and sisters, we first of all should assess our own self. How do you do that? Your son or your daughter, or your husband or wife, they may be dealing with the community when they go to the masjid. So when they have other friends or other people who come and meet them, they should meet them and welcome them. And especially now, and it's not just because of this, it shouldn't, and this is unfortunate that we have to, if we have not done before, to build our relationships with our brothers and sisters properly, at least start now and go to them, ask them how do they feel, be there for them, put yourself in their circumstance and feel for them the pain, the suffering that they are going through as a people. Because without a doubt, I'm not trying to understate, the other problems that we as a ummah are facing, because there's a lot of problems in our communities, like back home in Kashmir, likewise in India and Pakistan, and also in Bangladesh, and also in the Arab countries, in Palestine. There's so many things we can go on and on and on. about how many problems there are. But I don't want to make this problem seem small compared to those problems. And this is what we do a lot of times. We put this, we make this problem just a matter of the same thing that we are dealing with all the time. And that's not good. This is a very big problem. And this is one right in our own neighborhood. This is right in our own families. And this is a very serious problem. It's not half across the world. It's right here at home. And so this problem is a very great problem that all of us must solve, all of us must deal with. We need to talk to our children and our wives that how are they dealing with the Afro-Americans, brothers and sisters, the community. Some people, they also make a differentiation between blacks and Afro-Americans. Some blacks don't even like being called Afro-Americans. As you know, there's even, certain racism that, or stereotypes that are even from the African community with the American or the Black Americans here, And so there are various levels and various manifestations of racism that are among us. And I'll touch upon that a little bit in a few minutes. But so the first thing I just want to make clear is please sit your family down and assess your own selves. How are you dealing with your neighbors who may be Afro-American or Black? How are you dealing with your community members? How are you dealing with those who may be fellow workers, employees, and the community at large? Ask yourself that question. And if you see that you are not at par with the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, if you feel that you are better than them, then you are also practicing racism. You must rid yourself of that. You must rid yourself of pride and arrogance. And again, I'm going to say, go back to the video about pride and its cure. You can cure it. It's possible. It takes a lot of attention that we should be giving to it, but we don't. And if you cannot, then go to your local imams, your scholars, your ulama, ask them. And these are spiritual doctors. Go to them to cure yourself and rid yourself from this disease. I want to talk about a lot of things. There's certain aspects that we have to practice that will give us balance. And inshallah, I will mention that also in a few minutes if I have time for that. So that's the first thing. Please welcome the community. Go and talk to your Muslim brothers, your Afro-American brothers, your Black Muslim brothers. Go to talk to them, or your neighbors, or non-Muslims as well. And whoever they may be. If you have acquaintances or you have friends, neighbors, co-workers, etc., go and talk to them and empathize with them and be a part of their life and give them support, moral support, spiritual support, financial support if needed. That's what we can do in the least. In our masajid, we need to have inclusion and representation of our Afro-American brothers, our Black Muslim brothers. It's unfortunate we have so many politics in our masajid, fundraisers, and other aspects we have in our masajid. But rarely do we see the representation of our Afro-American brothers in the masjid, in leadership, or in positions that give them authority, in positions that they feel included in the society around us. How much are we doing that? So that's one thing. Another thing is we need to educate ourselves. And knowledge is the answer And when you sit with your family, first of all, starting with yourself, gain knowledge of how to rid ourselves from racism. Gain knowledge, because knowledge, it dispels fear. It takes away ignorance. It takes away darkness. And we are able to deal with things the right way. And so if you do that, it's very effective. Therefore, we need education against anti-black racism. You know, we have, like I mentioned before, many other problems. Don't bury this problem under all the other problems that you may be thinking about. Like, you may be going to your uh, black community member and telling them that, I feel for you, this and that, and you have a conversation. And then you sometimes start saying that, but we also have these problems, same thing, we're going through this and that. Don't try to belittle the problem that they're going through. Because without a doubt, I think this is probably the biggest problem in the US that all this black community and the Afro-American community are suffering greatly from. And we cannot avoid this anymore. You know, today, I mean, this was, George Floyd. Last time, it was Freddie Gray, right? Um, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner. The list goes on and on and on. And this is just another addition to that. And it's time for this to end. We have to, as a community, bring this to an end. Because if we like it or not, we have to remind ourselves that, like I kind of mentioned, and I want to mention this before I forget to, there are different layers or different manifestations uh, of racism. We have interpersonal racism that we obviously know about. One group thinks they're superior to another group. Uh, you know, just like we have the way, for example, whites may think uh, they're better than the black group, or they may think they're better than Latinos, etc. Latinos may think they're better than the whites, and vice versa. Blacks may think they're better than the whites. So these types of attitudes of looking at people, we see this a lot. That's only one manifestation or one layer of racism. You know, uh, even you will see that, for example, um, the blacks, like I mentioned before, even amongst themselves, sometimes the Africans, they don't understand, or they may, taunt the Americans for not, being more hard workers and lax in their work and etc., blaming them for certain things and that, you know, like they do back home. This may be a stereotype, and there's a lot of times we see this type of attitudes amongst themselves. And so this has to, really be kept in mind. Like today's khutbah uh, was talking about in some aspects. And so be careful with that. Then you have internalized racism, which is basically, we are teaching, or we are being taught about ourselves and the views about ourselves, uh, and how we view our own selves as inferior in our societies. And this is not good either, you know, because this will cause you yourself to look down at your own self and also look down at your community as well. So, an internalized racism is something that maybe some of us are suffering from. which is another manifestation of racism as well. And so we must remember the sayings of Allah and the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ are here to take us out of that inner feeling that I am not good enough for the society. I am not up to par with these people. You know, we have to get rid of that mentality. And it's challenging. It's difficult, especially when we are dealing with other types of racism, which are institutional racism, systemic racism, which is, built into this. Racism is built into this very system of this country. It's a sad reality, but we are seeing it. And, that's why sometimes you will see that schools and colleges, universities, they'll accept and give preference to, for example, white people over black people. This is going on, and this is institutional racism. This leads to systemic racism. It's built right into the system, and yes, it's going on, and it goes right all the way up through to the state and to the government. And so in the end, it becomes a structural racism, which is extremely, extremely difficult for a people, especially of minorities, and a people who have been under the pressure of this racism, to overthrow it and to become and to overcome it as a minority people. It's very difficult. And so we have to join in with our brothers and sisters in Islam and our brothers and sisters in humanity. In both aspects, we as Muslims should be doing our job, not making it more difficult for them, but opening up doors and building bridges and practicing, first of all, having good character and morals, because balance is extremely important in this time that we are living in. It's very easy to fall into various groups and to do things that may lead you and misguide you. And so we want to make sure that as a people, I'm going to remind you, and I said I would do this, is remind you of certain balance that we need in our societies as human beings. And when it comes to staying within parameters, so to say, we have to have balance in PQ, in IQ, in EQ, and an SQ. Each of them, you could say, give a 25% percentage, which equal up to 100%. And you can assess your own self in all of these aspects in order for you to be a balanced human being. We're always asking Allah to give us balance, right? Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. And وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. We talk about the mizan, we talk about balance, we talk about justice. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ لِلَّهِ وَلَوْ عَلَى أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. The verse which talks about justice. O you who believe, stand up for justice as witnesses for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though it may be against your own self, or your parents, or your relative and kin. Justice becomes difficult to practice with certain obstructions in the way. One of those obstructions is love. We have a love for our own people so much that even if they do something wrong, we justify it. We shouldn't be doing that, but we do because of certain racism, because due to the love that we have for them, we don't want to hurt them. But really, we are doing an injustice to them when we don't do justice. We don't serve justice. So, love can be obstruction in the way of justice. And likewise, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another verse in the next surah, after Surah Nisa, Surah Al Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qist. ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Here the other thing is being mentioned that becomes an obstacle in the way of justice, and that is hatred of a people. Hatred. So that's the opposite of love. And when you hate a people, even though they are right, you won't serve justice because you hate them. So, اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. To be just is closer to taqwa, and that's what we are looking for. That is called moderation. Now, in order to be moderate, it's important for a person to, pay attention to their obvious reasons. And the one I want to really concentrate on here is IQ, EQ, and SQ. The physical quotient of a person, the physical status of a person is important, the PQ, which is to stay, in a to stay physically fit. And that means that a person should be good in aspects of eating good food and benefiting their body. Eating something that is good and beneficial is important. Eating on time, not too much, not outside of time. That's important. To have daily exercise, at least an hour in a day, to sleep soundly, 6 to 8 hours, as the doctors say. And likewise, to have time for yourself, which is called, leisure time, you could say, which is basically no work, no business. Some may not have that leisure time, but you need that leisure time for yourself to be reminding yourself who you are and where you came from, and to reflect over life and where you're going towards. So that's number one. If you're not paying attention to that, you're not going to be a balanced person. Number two is your IQ. You should be a student every day, every single day. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man tasawa yawmahu fahu maghbun." Whose ever 2 days are the same, that person's a loser. How many of us fall in the same category? How many of us think that way? He said in another hadith that whoever's 2 days are the same is a loser, and he said, in explaining that, whoever's yesterday is not as good as today, or whoever's today is not as good as yesterday, that person is accursed. And whoever's tomorrow is less or worse than today, that person is accursed, or he's a loser. So the obvious meaning we understand is that person should be looking towards his intellectual, academic skills every single day. What is he gaining? in his education, in his skills, in his competency, in his reading, writing, in his speaking, in his speech. All of these things, we should be increasing our knowledge. We should be getting better and more proficient. If we are not, then we are not doing according to what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. So make sure you are a talibul ilm, a student of knowledge, every single day from the time you were born until we pass away from this dunya. We should be gaining knowledge. May Allah give us tawfiq. So if you're not, that means that you are not balanced in this aspects of your IQ. So PQ, physical quotient, and intellectual quotient. Then EQ, which is emotional quotient. And in that comes a big thing about controlling our anger. And if you look at what's going on in the news, and this is scary sometimes, it's like almost a tactic to take our attention away from the protests of what we should be worried about and bringing justice towards. Now people are looting and they are taking advantage of the situation. There's peaceful protests that are going on, and yet you see these sick people who are going right next door to their neighborhoods or to the place that they were targeting to burn down, like the police office building that they burnt down in Minneapolis. Right next to that, there were businesses of their own people that they were burning. By the way, just like I said before, transgression is wrong. Like, we don't blame the whole police department for this. If there's the people who are to blame are those 4 individuals who are inshallah going to be brought to justice. But that doesn't mean that we transgress and now blame all of them as being the same. Inshallah, that's not the case. And I'm sure you know, as well as I know, there are very good, caring people who are not racist. And they are good people. And so we should not transgress to the point where the real issues that are supposed to be talked about are being ignored. And they're being hidden because of this chaos that is going over, that we are seeing. And so stay away from such people. Anger, control your anger. Have empathy and use this anger in the right place, to defend our families, to defend our communities in the right way, but never to transgress and to do things of violence that we are seeing nowadays. So control the anger, and you should know that you can understand, first of all, how others are feeling. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith that we can never be complete believers until we don't like for ourselves or like for our Muslim brothers what we like for ourselves. Right? Also, it comes in narration that we should want people to be at ease and in comfort and in peace in our neighborhoods, in our locations, in our localities. Al-Muslimu man salima an-nasu min lisanihi wa yadihi. In one narration, man salima al-muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. A Muslim is the one who safeguards other Muslims. In one narration, safeguards all people from the harm of his tongue and the harm of his min lisanihi, from his tongue and his hands. So keep that in mind. And control your anger and understand the feelings of other people. But that begins with understanding your own self first. Do you actually know who you are? Do you control your anger? Do you uh, deal with people in an empathic way, with empathy, or not, let alone other people? So work on your emotional quotient. Then, if you are properly balanced, you will pay attention to that. And finally, SQ, which is a spiritual quotient, how much do you pay attention to that? You know, in this dunya, we have many objectives and goals. The objective for every Muslim is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. But I did not create the jinn and you except to worship. So ibadah is maqsood, is the purpose of life. And everything should lead back towards that. Fulfilling the right, and what does that mean? That means to fulfill the right of Allah and to fulfill the right of people. Yes, that's also an ibadah. And so by doing that, we must be loyal to fulfilling dunya with things and making sure that there are no problems that we are causing to our deen. And we should make sure we are upholding the rights of the people. So, in aspects of spiritual quotient, we should look at every day our character. If I am a racist, if I'm a narcissist, if I am a person who cannot control their anger, if I'm a person who has arrogance, how can I cure that? How can I get rid of those ailments, those things that are ruining my character? And because of that, they are ruining my family, which is ruining my society, which is ruining the country. But this is how far it spreads. We have to know that. And this is why I started with correcting our own selves. If we don't do that, we're going to see very soon that what happened to this man will happen to us next. And no one will be there to help you. And if that's what you're waiting for, then Allahul Musta'an. It's nafsi nafsi. It's a point where we've seen extremes. And the time we are living in is a very, very difficult time. There are tests that are going to come upon us. Just like the people before us were tested, we're being tested as well. Are you going to pass that test? Or are you going to fail? Each of us has great responsibility and duties to fulfill. Now, there may be doctors in our society. There may be, blue collar workers in our society. There's different people and we have different purposes. Whatever job you're doing, halal job, lawful job, first of all. What's your purpose for doing that job? If you're serving people, if you're doing that job, for example, there's two people. One is a doctor who's going to serve people, and he's doing it to eliminate sicknesses in the world and cure people and cure the community, etc. Obviously trying his best to serve people. And so that's a good thing. And a person may also strive to, for example, uh, cure malnutrition, right, in a certain area. This is good, So, what's your spiritual goal? Or is it just to come and feed your family, which is good, by the way, obviously? Uh, just make a paycheck, live day to day, which is a goal in itself, you know, carrying and feeding your family. It's fine. That's what most of us do. The first man is better. He's doing both of those things. He's caring for his family, but he has a high goal in mind. His spirituality is much further than this person, most likely, because his spiritual goals are higher. And so, PQ, IQ, EQ, SQ, these are all those values and those things that we need in our life in order for us to find balance. And if we don't find balance, it will lead to our becoming a people of Jahiliyyah. Just like in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he came to take people out of worshipping people to worshipping the Lord of the people. He took people out of the darknesses of oppression towards the justice of Islam. And so I've taken a lot of time. I think inshallah we'll just stop here. So I'm going to stop here with this, and inshallah I hope you will take a look at some of those videos that are in more definition, more tafsir, more detail about pride. But pride is something that we have to rid ourselves of, because this society that we are living in, there are very arrogant people here. They think themselves better than other people. And so just remember, this is a cause of the downfall of the shaitan. What? Pride. Shaitan was stronger in knowledge, in health, in all aspects, in many things. It was the pride that brought him down. It's that pride that will bring down humanity as well. Until we don't rid ourselves of it, we will keep seeing these horrible and horrific murders that are being taken place in front of our eyes. How are you going to go to your children? What came to my mind is also, just watching the officer, he wasn't even scared of that person. That man was in handcuffs. 2 other people were on that person, holding him down. And if you look at the man who had his knee on the neck of this person, he had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes. And because of that, this person died. He killed him. No doubt about it. I mean, if that video, it seems to be authentic, and that's exactly what, millions of people saw it. But he had his hand in his pocket. And the man was saying to him, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. This definitely was wrong. It's a munkar. This man will be brought to justice. Justice will be served. Inshallah, we will be just ourselves, with our families, ourselves, and with our communities, so that we will prevail, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all to the right path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast upon our deen. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rid us of every single iota of racism that is inside of us. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.